This is Garis, Masculist, MGTOW flyers. That is 2 3-page essays on the themes of masculism and MGTOW, written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. This is flyer number 659, entitled Masculism as Penicillin Against the Feminazi Plague. Description. Masculists see monoconscious feminism as a plague to be exterminated by biconscious masculist ideas. This flyer shows how masculists can create a much happier society by preaching biconscious masculist ideas to women, to monoconscious feminists, to men, to society, so that the monoconscious feminist pendulum that has swung far too far from equilibrium can be brought back into balance by the masculist realization that gender oppression is very much a two-way street, and that in reality women oppress men worse. Masculists have a hatred of feminist monoconsciousness and crush it when they come across it with vicious, verbally hateful masculist rhetoric aiming to wipe it out. Now the flyer itself. Masculism as Penicillin Against the Feminazi Plague, by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. Masculists have a hatred of monoconscious feminists, seeing them as arch-hypocrites, as sexist, hypocritical bigots, as MFBs, that's monoconscious feminazi bigots, who have been lashing out at men for the ways that men oppress women, bracket in brackets, that masculism does not deny, close bracket, e.g. men's rape, men's domestic violence, men's sexual harassment, men's patriarchal control of women, etc. But women's, feminists, monoconscious bigotry, women's, feminists, gender political ignorance of the fact that gender oppression is very much a two-way street, and that women oppress men far worse than vice versa, is too much for biconscious masculists to bear. So when biconscious masculists come across monoconscious feminists who dump on men in public, these biconscious masculists bite the fucking heads off these monoconscious feminazis in a vicious, verbally violent masculist tirade against the sexist, hypocritical bigotry of these monoconscious feminists who masculists see as vermin, even more hated than fluffies who are truly hated by abolitionist masculists for being manslavers and for one father in four, for being divorce rapists whom masculists aim to wipe out, to effectively exterminate by totally ignoring such women, forcing them to rot on the shelf, dying slow, miserable deaths, because no man will go near them as most men become masculisted in the coming years. A process that is already well underway, with now several million men around the world who are now masculists or MGTOWs. Masculists see monoconscious feminism as a plague that has done enormous damage to millions of women and to men, for the following reasons. Feminism has caused millions of women to become undateable for men. According to a jaw-dropping poll recently by Pew Research Center, over 60% of young men between 18 and 30 in the US refuse to even date women, arguing that young US women are now undateable due to having absorbed monoconscious feminist ideas that have caused them to become feminazi bitchy towards men, hating men for the gender crimes that men commit against women, for example, those listed above. Men don't want relationships with misandrist, male-dumping, feminazi cunts and avoid them like the plague. To biconscious masculists, monoconscious feminism is a plague, one that needs to be destroyed, which is where biconscious masculism comes in and is the main topic of this flyer. Nearly all feminists are monoconscious. The only gender politics that they have heard of is feminist. And feminism is a deeply misandrist, gynocentric ideology that preaches to women that gender oppression is a one-way street, that women are the oppressed and men are the oppressors. Feminists cherry-pick those legitimate examples of when men do oppress women, as listed above. Masculists, biconscious masculists, who by definition are as well informed about feminist ideas as masculist ideas, do not deny that men oppress women. What does piss off masculists greatly, however, is the level of monoconsciousness of feminists, who understandably feel fully justified in being angry, being feminazi bitchy towards men for the ways that men oppress women, which is what feminism teaches women. So it's no surprise, after 6 decades of gender political monopoly by feminism, that today millions of women are feminazi bitchy towards men, making them undateable for the majority of men. Over 60% of young men in the US, for example, as mentioned above. Masculists are out to change all that by preaching masculist ideas to men, to women, to society, so that the monoconscious feminist poison can be antidoted, can be exterminated, can be eliminated, can be killed. Society will be a lot better off once it has become biconscious for a string of reasons. Women will be better off, men will be better off, society will be better off. Look at the enormous damage that monoconscious feminism has done to women, to millions of women. They have been taught by feminism to hate men for the ways that men oppress women. Feminism is a totally genocentric ideology that says nothing, in capital letters, about how women oppress men. To learn that, one needs to have one's masculist consciousness raised, learning that gender oppression is very much a two-way street, and that in fact women oppress men far worse than vice versa, since many of women's gender crimes against men are horrible, capital letters, and last decades. The worst 3 ways that women oppress men being women's manslavery, women's divorce rape, women's forced fathering, which are far more serious gender crimes than even rape against women. But nearly all feminists at the time of writing, that's February 2024, are ignorant of masculist ideas, so are not informed how women oppress men, and so badly. So biconscious masculists are fed up with the misandrous bitching against men of the monoconscious feminists and crush them when they come across them with vicious, verbally violent harangues against them, blowing them out of the room with statements like, quote, "Learn some masculism, you monoconscious feminazi cunts. God, women like you are hated by masculists for your sexist, hypocritical bigotry. You women oppress men far worse than vice versa with your awful, decades-lasting gender crimes against men, such as manslavery, divorce rape, forced fathering, etc. These are horrible gender crimes that women commit against men, causing masculists to hate gender criminal women, so we punish them severely by effectively exterminating them, by totally ignoring them, not even pumping and dumping them, so they rot on the shelf, dying slow, miserable deaths, because men refuse to have relationships with misandrous feminazi cunts and punish them by not going near them. We masculists are fed up with hearing how men oppress women, when in reality you women oppress men far worse. So learn some masculism, you fat, ugly, unfuckable, misandrous feminazi cunts hated by masculists. You women are 99.5% heterosexual, so most of you monoconscious feminists are still dependent on men for your sex. So we masculists target your currently monoconscious male feminist boyfriends, teaching them masculism so that these men become biconscious. That is, they have had both their feminist and their masculist consciousnesses raised, so they learn that gender oppression is very much a two-way street and that women oppress men far worse. These now biconscious masculist boyfriends will see your monoconscious feminism as bigoted, will become disgusted with you and then dump you in your millions. We masculists want monoconscious feminazis to convert yourselves to being biconscious feminists and hence be much nicer to men. Since a biconscious feminist loses her monoconscious feminazi bitchery towards men, since her monoconscious feminist anger at men for the ways that men oppress women is cancelled, capital letters, by her biconscious anger at women for the ways that women oppress men. making her a lot nicer and more approachable by men, which will make millions of women happier since they will have a man in their lives instead of being massively boycotted, as is the case now, when over 60% of young men in the US refuse to even date young women." End quote. So, when millions of feminists are biconscious, there will be many more relationships between the sexes than is the case today, because women, biconscious feminist women, will be a lot less feminazi bitchy, because they will have lost their anger and hatred at men for the ways that men oppress women, because they will see, due to their bi-consciousness, that women are even worse in oppressing men, and so badly. So millions of women will be a lot happier due to the spread of biconscious masculism, which neutralizes monoconscious feminism, destroying it, killing it, implicit in the title of this flyer. Millions of men will also be a lot happier, since the monoconscious bitching of feminists against men will cease as monoconscious feminists die out. Masculists teach young women that their babylessness is due to the fluffy feminists who control the divorce courts, who have made divorce so toxic for men that young men, over 70% of them in many countries now, refuse to marry and have kids, refusing to give young women their sperm, thus causing millions of young women to panic as they realise that truly they are not going to have a baby in their lives due to millions of men boycotting paternity. The Masculists tell these young women to hate the monoconscious fluffy feminists who control the divorce courts for their babylessness, so these young women will combine forces with the biconscious Masculists in hating these monoconscious fluffy feminists. With millions of people of both sexes hating monoconscious feminism, it will not survive, forcing millions of monoconscious feminists to convert themselves into biconscious feminists. Masculists want the gender laws men feared, especially in the divorce courts, which today are slaughterhouses for divorcing fathers who lose custody of their kids with a 90% probability, lose their house to their ex-wives, half their wealth and stuff, forced to make child payments to their kids whom they are barely allowed to see, and if their ex-wives are real fluffies, forced to pay them alimony until these men die. Modern divorce is so toxic for men that most young men now refuse to marry and reject paternity, thus crashing the birth rate, making the fluffy feminists who control the divorce courts both hypocrites and indirect genociders. Masculists want GECs, G-E-Cs, Gender Equality Committees, to be set up in the parliaments that consist half of female feminists and half of male masculists, so that the gender issues of both sexes are dealt with equally, which is far from the case today, in today's gynocentric world, gender politically speaking. The masculinist half of these GECs will push for the fipping of women, for the creation of a FIP society, for the legislation of the that's paternity rejection right, to give men the same right as women to reject an unwanted pregnancy. FIP women can afford to pay for a kid on her own if she decides to take the pregnancy to term. Masculists see biconscious masculism as the antidote to monoconscious feminism, as the penicillin to the monoconscious feminazi plague that has so poisoned society, causing massive suffering to millions of people of both sexes. This is not to deny that the monoconscious feminists have a point when they say that men oppress women. Men do. But monoconscious feminists know only half the gender political story, so have poisoned millions of minds with their ignorant belief that gender oppression is a one-way street, causing millions of women to hate men, when that hatred could have been avoided if only these feminists had been bi-conscious. Thus, biconscious masculism will right the monoconscious pendulum that has swung far too far from the vertical and caused massive harm. Masculism, biconscious masculism, is that force that will bring the gender political pendulum back to equilibrium, restoring the balance, teaching the planet that gender oppression is a two-way street and that men need to be liberated from female gender crimes against men by transforming society, converting it into a FIP society, by creating the GECs, GECs, by men fairing the gender laws, by wiping out monoconscious feminism in all its awful gender criminality and hypocrisy. Cheers. Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. In brackets, click on the Masculist tab for 650 plus Masculist essays and their videos. See also a London Reel interview on Masculism at AI will kill 1 billion people, dash. Do we create our exterminators, question mark. Professor Hugo de Garis, dash. London Reel, in brackets. See the last half hour of this 2-hour interview for the Masculist segment. These flyers are available in text and video formats on Minds, BitChute, Odyssey, MGTOW TV and X. Ciao.